evening and welcome to the show that all the stars tune into before issuing their writs. In the news this week, following his appointment as international mediator in the Yugoslav crisis, Mark Thatcher arrives in Croatia. After London Zoo's 15-year failure to get a captive panda to mate, Edward Heath offers to do his bit. And following the success of the Sumo Festival, another new craze arrives from Japan, kamikaze crooning.
Anna, the end is here! The final curtain!
As usual, two teams of articulate humorists take part in this game of verbal dexterity to be decided by 3 falls and a submission. On Ian Hislop's team this week, someone who for the last 10 years has pretended to be married to Margaret Thatcher. And if that's not a sign of a seriously sick mind, I don't know what is. John Wells. And on Paul Merton's team, author of Selling Hitler and someone who's been on this show before, so he obviously doesn't learn from experience, Robert Harris. So let's charge recklessly into the first round. Ian and John, here's your chance to go straight to jail without passing go. Who's arguing with who here?
Oh dear. Oh, it's Mr.
You know.
That chap.
That's the other one.
George Galloway. There's a safe way of answering this question, which is that Mr. Maxwell is up to nothing at all. And he's been vilely slandered all week.
And the other way?
The other way is the way to get the BBC lawyer having a heart attack. Hello?
Yes.
There have been allegations. Allegedly. That man, Mr. Nick Davis, who's the foreign editor of The Mirror, who's actually married to someone from Doctor Who. Fascinating detail.
A Dalek?
A Dalek.
Are you saying this man's married to somebody from another planet?
That's the worst allegation. There's some stuff about arms dealing and belonging to the Israeli Secret Service, but I don't think we have to go into that, really.
No, I don't think we do either. Yes, it's the gravest. It's the gravest possible allegations against the Daily Mirror's foreign editor, Nick Davis, that he acted as an agent of the Israeli Secret Service, Mossad, and that he sold Israeli arms to Iran, which is a complete and total lie. If it were not so serious, it would be laughable. So. On the subject of Mossad, one of the MPs who repeated the allegations in Parliament demanded to know the extent to which intelligence had penetrated the Daily Mirror. Judging by its editorials, not a great deal. Paul and Robert, who's fooling who here?
Willie Rushton. Is this the man who claims to have forged 1,000 old masters?
It is.
And sold them to Rupert Murdoch?
Talking about that last bit. Yes. It's forger Eric Hebon is his name, who after 30 years...
A bit of a giveaway, having your name as forger Eric Hebon. You know, it's like when you read police are looking for Mr. Big, you know. Why didn't he change his name?
Yes, after 30 years, he's come clean and admitted that over 1,000 old masters in galleries around the world were actually painted by him. Early suspicions that he was a fake were allayed by Sir Anthony Blunt, the well-known rhyming slang, who gave him a written authentication, which is about as reliable as a character reference from Pol Pot. Hebon's technique was so flawless that his shepherds and cattle at a ford went for £9,500. His fake Piranesi drawing is now the centrepiece in the National Gallery of Denmark, and it wasn't until he produced his Mona Lisa in Everton scarf that experts became suspicious. Ian and John, what affront to religious sensibilities is this?
That's Basil Brush.
Yes, these are new decorative contraceptives they're bringing out.
This is Sunday trading, or Christmas trading or something. People are objecting to the fact that shops are open and people are buying presents. In fact, I think a lot of religious groups are complaining about people celebrating Christmas. Quite rightly. You don't want any of that.
I think he's right. I think it's about left-wing fox hunters who want to go on doing it. And very devout communists will be upset by little furry creatures being killed when they want to get on with the fox hunting.
It's an intriguing answer and almost entirely incorrect, but I'll give you an extra point for it anyway. It's the campaign by the Church of England, as Ian mentioned, to prevent thousands of shops opening on the 2 Sundays before Christmas. Quite rightly, of course, they see it as the tip of the iceberg. 1 minute a man goes shopping in B&Q, the next he's sacrificing innocent virgins to the Antichrist. British law still prohibits shops from opening on Sundays on the grounds that it might be helpful. Church leaders claim that all their arguments are supported by passages from the Bible, and on the 7th day man shall rest, and shall not buy a set of folding stepladders from Texas Home Depot. Paul and Robert, what's this tacky display?
A wedding. This must be the blind date wedding. I didn't see it, but presumably that's what it is.
Did anyone see Scylla's hat? She wore a giant mushroom on her head. Oh dear.
It's Sue and Alex Tatham are their names, who met on LWT's blind date and were married this week in a cosy little ceremony in front of 12 million people. The birth of their first baby will no doubt turn up on Surprise, Surprise. Their first row will be set up by Jeremy Beadle, and in 7 years' time their divorce will be featured on Midweek Sports Special. Which showbiz gossip brings us to the end of the first round, at which point I can tell you that Paul and Robert have a rather unimpressive 4, and Ian and John have an entirely admirable 5.
If you're already using Optimax Unleaded, you'll know the difference it can make. The extra power to respond safely just when you need it. But then what else would you expect from the only fuel developed with Ferrari?
Announcing a breakthrough for baby soft skin. What's so funny? New light oil mist from Johnson. It locks in more moisture than many lotions. Please. For baby soft skin. But no greasiness. Yes! New Johnson's baby light oil. Oh, do grow up.
At this point, just when we've got started, we like to stop and do something else, to wit our now almost regular caption competition. Each team is shown a photograph. Paul and Robert, this is yours. Ian and John, commit this to memory. Could you ever forget? And whenever the camera isn't on you, you're at liberty to while away the time by thinking of a witty caption or two. So while you stimulate your creative juices, let's slip into our rubber galoshes and descend into the steamy bowels of Fleet Street for a look at the week's tabloid headlines. One each. Paul, what's this coded instruction? Dial the palace and ask for Charlie.
Oh, this is a great scandal happening at Buckingham Palace. There is a number that you can phone. You can get through on the Palace extension, and you can actually speak to Prince Charles, and he will come out and lecture you in small dark rooms in the middle of Soho about the various crimes and architecture that have been played over the years, and how he's not really happy with his wife, and how he wishes the goons would get back together again. And then he gives you and then he gives you a great big bag full of cocaine. Allegedly.
I like the one about the woman who stole Fergie's dresses and then pleaded insanity. It's not that one.
Absolutely right. It's the Daily Mirror again, in fact, which identified a mysterious young woman who lived in Buckingham Palace from where she delivered drugs in her baby's pushchair. So it couldn't have been Fergie. Police later arrested a girl for allegedly dealing in cocaine in the Buckingham Palace grounds. Brings a whole new meaning to the phrase Royal Highness. A Buckingham Palace spokesman said, "Hey bro, ain't no bad shit around here, man." Unusual for Prince Philip to be quite so outspoken. Robert, an offer you can't refuse. Free trip to China. What's this about?
This is, the Cabinet have clubbed together to buy this for Mrs Thatcher during the next election. This is a free gift with your petrol from Texaco. If you collect £180,000 worth of tokens, you get a free trip to China. Unfortunately, you could probably buy China with £180,000.
Absolutely right. That's enough petrol to drive to China and back 200 times. Plus buy a new engine for your Sierra, which by this stage would have done 1.25 million miles. John, what's this desperate publicity stunt? Radio Girl's tot will be airborne.
I expect it's... Sue McGregor is going to have a baby on news at...
On the Today programme.
On the Today programme in the morning.
Yes, well, I'll give you 1 point. Paul and Robert, any ideas?
Oh, I don't know, really, no.
Well, I'll give myself the other point then. It's about radio DJ Suki Mean of Australia's CFM, who decided to give birth live on air. Yes, it's rather difficult, I would have thought, to keep up the DJ patter in those circumstances. Presumably, as the baby comes out, she'll be saying, and joining me now in the studio. The idea came from a US radio sports journalist who had a vasectomy whilst reading his column on air. I think I could have phrased that rather better. You wonder where it all ends. Simon Bates having a frontal lobotomy live on air. Would anyone notice? And finally, in this round, Ian, instant sunshine in the Politburo.
They obviously moved the Edinburgh Festival to the Kremlin.
I thought this was the Ukrainians were going to explode a thermonuclear device over Moscow to warm them up a bit.
Something about...
The Kremlin used to insist that the weather forecaster said there would be fine weather on May Day.
Yes, you're right. I'll give you a couple of points. The Politburo and their habit of instructing the East German weathermen to issue completely bogus forecasts. I always thought Michael Fish looked slightly German. This was to ensure there would be forecasts of warm and sunny weather for every official occasion. I must say, I'd have thought after 5 years of forecasts of 82 degrees for the New Year's Day parade in East Berlin, someone will smelt a rat. If they hadn't already roasted it for Christmas dinner. That brings us staggering to the end of round 2, and I can tell you that, well, Ian and John now have a thoroughly putrid 6, and Paul and Robert have a nourishing 10.
Good.
Time now for our so-called connections round, in which each team is forced to sit through a tasteless montage of seemingly unrelated film clips which cryptically hint at a major news story of the week. Ian and John, dismember this.
One of those bamboo shoots they eat.
Peter Sellers.
Selling cannabis. Cake by Jane Asher. Lovely, that's Jane Asher. That's Esther Ranson. Oh, there she is again. The whole of That's Life.
It was this very, very amusing case, wasn't it? About this woman. She was very amusing. She had, for £1,100, you are allowed by the police to give your auntie hash cakes. And then she goes completely bananas, thinks she's being chased by Esther Ranson on the Rottweiler show, and eventually ends up doing a Nebuchadnezzar eating grass up and down the motorway.
Strangely enough, you're absolutely right, yes. 2 points. It's housewife Margaret Jellicoe, who unwittingly ate a plate of chocolate cake which had been spiked with cannabis by her 23-year-old niece. There's always a bit of a gas, isn't it, tricking your close relatives into consuming dangerous narcotics. And one of the effects on Mrs. Jellicoe was to make her think she was on That's Life. Always thought it was supposed to make you fantasize, not have nightmares. So that serves a warning to any youngsters watching who might be tempted to appear on That's Life. It's been a druggy week this week, as I was remarking to the Tangerine Elephant before... Paul and Robert, unravel this.
Oh, when I was bound apprentice
Robert Maxwell.
Richard Branson, the remains of Richard Branson's hot air balloon, Kill the Bastard,
Ends up in court.
Yes, lots of wine.
Urine specimen.
We give up. No, we don't. We've no idea.
No
idea at
Any
all.
ideas on this side?
It's the ITC ruling that no franchises which Branson is involved in can win any station at all. Which I thought was a very, very good bit of legislation.
Yes.
So he's flying off to America.
Having had an illegal ban in the country.
With Sir Alec Douglas Hume in that
like
black
him.
and white footage, yes.
Possibly Sir Alec Douglas Hume's Gilly.
Am I to take it that you
John has
know
a
either?
defect with G's.
Are you suggesting that Richard Branson is having a homosexual affair with Sir Alec Douglas Hume?
I think
That would be like suggesting Robert Maxwell's been up to no good all week. Ridiculous.
I think I can safely assume neither side knows the answer to this one. It's Richard Branson, yes, a Virgin tycoon, who claims to have lost £1.5 million because American authorities have refused until recently to grant his airline a drinks license. He maintains this was because of a criminal record resulting from a harmless youthful prank when he was fined £8 for poaching pigeons, and not because of his next harmless youthful prank of wackily being arrested for failing to pay the Inland Revenue £53,000. Tricks kids get up to, eh? Branson, who spent a night behind bars for his sins, this week said you learn a lot from a night spent with just a filthy blanket and one drink, presumably where he got the idea for his Virgin Atlantic's in-flight service. And so, onward and ever sideways as we rummage through the debris of yesteryear in our archive round. One piece of antique footage per team. Ian and John. Who's this period piece and what happened next?
Would you join me in a toast to President Figueiredo, to the people of Bolivia?
What was he going to say, Ian?
He was going to say, he actually... He was giving a toast to President Figueiredo of, I think he says there, Bolivia. Anyway, he wasn't in Bolivia, unfortunately. He was in Colombia or Ecuador or somewhere. And he forgot which particular revolting dictatorship he was selling arms to at that particular dinner. Well, I'm sure we'll see.
Let's see if you're right.
Would you join me in a toast to President Figueiredo, to the people of Bolivia, or to... That's where I'm going. To the people of Brazil.
Ron and Nancy were up in Glasgow this week looking for their roots, their Irish roots, presumably. And by the look of their tartan suits, they could well be related to one of the Bay City Rollers. Paul and Robert, I'm not going to give you any points for guessing who this is, but what happened next this time?
And at the dinner itself, that other mature actor for once muffed his lines.
We have been able to...
Is this where he mistakenly called Princess Di an anorexic tart?
I'm very relieved to say no, it isn't.
Really? You surprised me.
He called her Princess David?
Princess David.
Well, let's have a look.
We have been able to have this affair with Princess David, Princess Diane.
That's one letter right. Pretty good for him. David.
Yes, it's Ronnie again, this time mistaking our own beloved Princess Diana for someone he was having an affair with called Princess David. Presumably he was confusing her with Camp David. So, reassuring, though, I think, to know that for 8 years he stood between us and nuclear oblivion. Let's bomb Moscow. Sorry, I meant, could you pass the salt? So, at the end of this, our fourth round, I can now tell you that, well, Ian and John now trail lugubriously with 10, and Paul and Robert have roared into a lead of 12.
Oh,
So we chug merrily into our odd one out round, 4 familiar faces each. One of them doesn't fit. Who and why is what we want to know. Paul, as you've had the most difficult ones over the past couple of weeks, we've decided to give you an even more difficult one. Saddam Hussein, Che Guevara, Sebastian Coe, and Neil Kinnock.
Sebastian Coe's the only one who's run a mile under 4 minutes. Neil Kinnock's had a vasectomy. He's the only one who's had a vasectomy. Che Guevara's the only one who's dead. Saddam Hussein's the only one with a moustache, so it's... it's got to be one of those four, surely.
None of it's right, unfortunately.
They're all socialists except Kinnock.
No, I'm going to have to tell you this one. They all suffer from asthma, apart from Neil Kinnock, who, of course, is never short
Well,
of
Che
that.
Guevara doesn't suffer from asthma. He's been dead for over 25 years. If you dig him up, you're not going to hear wheezing from inside.
Well, he's not at all well, anyway. Che Guevara spent most of the 60s on every student's wall. No wonder he was out of breath. Saddam Hussein also has difficulty breathing, and not quite enough difficulty for most people. Robert Harris, you get this week's dumb animal. Jeffrey Archer, Tammy Wynette, Princess Anne, and continuing our equine fixation, Shergar.
I'm tempted to say that Shergar is the one who looks least like a horse. I'm tempted to say that, Shergar obviously was kidnapped. It wasn't Princess Anne. It wasn't their attempted kidnap. I don't know whether Tammy Wynette's been kidnapped. Jeffrey Archer certainly hasn't been because no one would pay the ransom. I therefore say that Jeffrey Archer is the wrong one, odd one out.
Very good indeed. Yes, well done. 2 points. It's Jeffrey Archer, as he's the only one never to have been the victim of kidnap attempt, rather tragically. But he's obviously worried by the possibility, otherwise he wouldn't carry around thousands of pounds in brown paper envelopes. In 1978, Tammy Wynette was the victim of a KIDNAP, presumably by music lovers. Princess Anne was the only member of the royal family the IRA have attempted to kidnap. Boy, did they pick the wrong one there. And 9 years later, they tried again, but in a case of mistaken identity, they got Shergar instead. John, a rather unwholesome ménage à quatre for you.
Excellent.
Derek Jameson.
Oh, yeah.
Mrs. Jameson.
Yes.
John Stalker.
Oh.
And Mrs. Stalker.
Don't think much of yours.
I think Jameson could be quite attractive in the right light.
Haven't they all... Oh, isn't it amazing? What a load of rubbish. I think they've all been asked several offences to be taken into consideration to do with broadcasting.
Yes, it's well deduced. Following his dismissal from the breakfast show, Derek Jameson's subtle style of broadcasting will shortly be heard on Late Night Show with his wife Ellen. John Stalker was, of course, once a police officer and is now a part-time DJ, sort of Eddie Shoestring without the looks, or the voice, or the acting ability, or the policing ability. Finally, Ian, 4 selfless do-gooders for you. Ceausescu, Adolf Hitler, Erich Honecker, and someone else.
Now, someone wants to see me lose a huge amount of money.
Go on, do it, do it.
Ceausescu, hated dictator, left-wing lunatic. Honecker, hated dictator, left-wing lunatic. Robert Maxwell, philanthropist. Genius, brain surgeon.
National hunt jockey.
This is a publishing question.
It is?
It is that the chap in the bottom right,
Yes.
with the bow tie, the chap who won this week's sumo contest, the Albert Hall, he has published the life of himself, a very unbiased account. Erich Honecker, he published a life of him, I believe, and he also published a life of Ceausescu.
Yes, Hitler's the only one whose thoughts or his life has not been published by Robert Maxwell. He's published his own thoughts, which is near enough, I suppose. In fact, they appear every day in the Mirror. why I'm right about everything, and how I didn't personally fiddle my own Spot the Ball competition. Among the literary homicidal tyrants published by Maxwell's companies are Nicolae Ceausescu, the Romanian mass murderer, Todor Zhivkov, the Bulgarian exterminator, and Erich Honecker, the vicious East German weather forecast fiddler. Which fascinating information brings us to the end of this round, at which point both scores are absolutely level.
Hurrah!
So, almost excitingly poised, we ease ourselves gently into the final round, in which we brazenly exhibit a set of headlines with one or two words missing. Our teams must identify those words or come up with something better. Paul and Robert, you have to go first, I'm afraid. Gorbachev accused of role in what?
The men's room.
Emmerdale.
Roll in hay.
Coup.
Aid misuse is
Aid
the
misuse.
Surprising you got that one. Next, don't vote for us if you want what, say Labour.
Socialism. Aid misuse.
Any change?
Guessing here.
Tax cuts.
Yes, very
The
good.
chap with
Tax
glasses,
cuts
I
is
thought.
very good. Next, Synod asked to discuss what?
The Archbishop's dress sense.
This is supposed to be our round.
No, you're not getting anywhere near it. I'll tell you,
Arsenal's
it's
chances in the European Cup.
slightly
It's something
nearer.
to
In
do
a
with
city
coloured
riots.
vicars. It's coloured vicars, I think.
It isn't coloured because it's new liturgies, so there we are.
are.
Next,
Liturgies.
Next, Major is what, says Minister's wife.
Well, Major is blank, says Minister's wife. That sounds it. Sexy.
Is it woman?
Not sexy. No,
Rather.
not a woman either. Wrong.
Attractive.
Is the answer. Wrong is the answer.
Israeli spy.
And lastly, Philip laughed as I did what to the Queen?
Straddled.
Yes, is incorrect.
Tickled.
Introduced Robert Maxwell to.
Probed.
Sent up is the
Sent
right
up.
answer. There we are. No, too late. Okay, right, Ian and John. Health chiefs deny that patients are being made to what?
Recover.
Not true.
Perform their own operations.
Virtually pay is the answer. Next, angry MPs get censored copy of what?
The men's room.
Barbara Cartland's obituary.
Wishful thinking.
Report.
Your report on MBBCCI. BBC.
Oh, yes, very good. BCCI report. Next, Duke says small what?
Families.
Families is
Brains.
correct. Well done. Next, Norma has a gift for winning what?
Raffles, which is where she gets her clothes.
Mud wrestling competitions.
No, Friends is the answer. And finally, Harry and Wills go on what in disguise?
Child line.
Blind date, I thought. They've got to start looking early. They'll end up like Prince Edward unless they start now.
The answer is, of course, Canada trip. Which earth-shattering climax means that the end result is that this week's paupers are Ian and John with 16, and this week's princes are Paul and Robert with 18.
Oh, dear.
So, flowers and champagne to our winners and utter contempt for our losers. But before they slope off into the night, way back when, at the start of the show, we asked them to come up with some choice captions to their photographs. Paul and Robert, what did you think of for this one?
I thought of, come in, Mr. Wogan, your wig is ready.
So, Ian and John, what about yours?
This was, I'm totally innocent, it says so in here.
On which hugely contentious note, we say thank you to our guests, Ian Hislop and John Wells, Paul Merton and Robert Harris, and we leave you with news that Richard Branson has finally revealed the method he uses to audition stewardesses for Virgin Airlines. And finally, some good news. Following recent storm damage, work began today on rethatching Colin Moynihan's house. Good night.